Okay, so we're going to start. So we're going to start at the very beginning. The first Ramban. The Ramban explains why it is that this parsha is introduced in the way it is. A lot of the Mefarshim deal with this. The first parsha is the parsha of Nedorim, vows and oaths. And why is it that it says Moshe said to the Roshei HaMatos, the heads of the tribes, what is that about? And the Ramban says, Lo hiktem akosav leimar b'kan v'aydav Hashem al Moshe leimar daber Roshei HaMatos martanim zeh davar shetzivah Hashem. Generally says you find that it says Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe Leimar, right? Then speak. But it does say, at the end of this parsha, it does say, these are the statutes that Hashem commanded Moshe. So it says it there. And in fact, it says you find other parshas, it says, this is the matter that Hashem commanded you shall do, and there it doesn't say the command at all. With the parsha of the Mon, it doesn't say at all that it was that Hashem said to Moshe. Just that Moshe says this is what Hashem commanded. So Rabban seems to be pointing out that it's not. It's effectively it's not unusual. It's saying that Hashem commanded that. And here is what it specifically mentioned. It means that Hashem had commanded him to say to them, even though it's not spelt out at the beginning. And here, in fact, it's spelt out at the end. Now, who are the Roshei HaMatos? So he says, "V'Roshei HaMatos l'Bnei Yisrael, the heads of the tribes of Bnei Yisrael, heim nesiei hadegolim. These are the princes of the flags of the tribes. Shehemidu osom hamatos al digleihem. The tribes appointed over their flags. Achash shemesu Nachshon ben Aminadab v'chaverov. After Nachshon, the son of Aminadab and his friends passed away. So who exactly are they? So he gives two options. If you look in Matos Masai, it says there's a list of the heads of the Shvatim to whom the land is to be allocated. Or he says, or there are others. They're talking about the future. When the land was divided up, those ones would be alive, and they would point them over them. It's a good question. Yeah, Shevet is the tribe. Mata we also translate as a tribe, and obviously there's a difference between them. See, the Unclus, the Targum says Shivtaya, which is Shevet. He translates into Aramaic the word Mata to Shevet. So it does effectively mean the same thing, but obviously there must be a difference between the usage of the words. Absolutely. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, Shevet. Yeah, because a Shevet can also mean a rod, a staff. Anyway, okay. Yeah.
When I said
yeah,
I feel like I see it in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what, the 38th year, although it's right at the end now. So the future is after the end of the Torah. I'm not sure what it means. Future. People that are not yet born, or people.
No, I don't think so. I think it's saying that it could be these were others, because later on when it talks about the division of the land, it's talking about the future. That when they eventually divide up the land, once they enter Eretz Yisrael, these are those people who would be appointed for it, and therefore the ones here are others. Yeah. Now the question is, why is it that it only refers to the heads of the Shvatim? Why not the whole of the Jewish people? The reason why it says the Moshe said to the heads of the tribes, so here the Ramban goes in the following route. The Ramban says that there was no need. This was a very specialized parsha. It wasn't need to tell the whole of the Bnei Yisrael. It's interesting that Rashi says no. Rashi says it was a question of honor. Rashi says there was an honor given to the Nesiim. They were told first, but then everyone else was told about it. The Ramban says no. The Ramban says there was no need lelamed l'chol Bnei Yisrael, to teach the whole Bnei Yisrael sheha'av v'habal yecholin lahofen nidrei inui nefesh, that the father and the husband are able to annul the vows which were of personal affliction. You know, the vows they're allowed to annul. Perhaps maybe actually it was necessary to hide these rules from them so that people would not be lenient and lackadaisical about the severity of vows. Avol l'chachmei Yisrael, but to the Chachmei Yisrael, the great sages, Roshei Shifteim, to the heads of the tribes, Limit HaMishpat, the law had to be taught. The Yirmaz Od Midrash Rabbi Seinu, Ki l'Roshei Matos, the heads of the tribes, Yod Vashem ben Adorim Yosim Mishara'om. They have more of an impact, more of an influence in the Nadarim, right, than the rest of the people, right? That's a paraphrase of the pasuk in the HaTorah for the fast days, Yad Vashem. That's where it comes from, Yad Vashem, right? Yad Vashem. Your hand in a name. It's supposed to get in the HaTorah for in Yeshayahu and for HaTorah for fast days. Why is it they've got more of a hand in the Nadarim? Because of one individual expert chacham can annul a vow. The heter of Nadarim is not spelled out in the Torah. It is explained and it is hung dependent on the thickness of a hair. This is one of the examples that the Chazal say in Chagigo, the principle of annulling vows, being mater neder, is just flying in the air. It doesn't have anything to rely on. The Torah hints to it, shall not profane his word. Kloma means to say, it doesn't say you shall not transgress his word. You should not annul his word. Should not make the vow profane. Because when he comes to Beis Yom Pesach and he finds an opening for the vow, and he regrets it, and they forgive him, he does not profane it. He does not profane it. Okay, so there's just a very slight hint in the Torah to the idea that a chacham can annul a vow. It's very interesting. This whole parsha details in detail about the annulment of vows by the father and the husband, but it doesn't mention the fact that you can go to a chacham, like we do that on Erev Rosh Hashanah, right? To Toras Nadarim. But there is a way of doing it, and it's learned from the fact that it says you shall not profane his words. That means to say, if you break the neder without it being annulled, then you will be profaning a word. But there's a way of doing it without profaning, if you get it annulled. The Torah wanted to make these ideas, the fact that you can be matter them, like secrets of the Torah, so it should only be said to those who are fitting and suitable for them, and they should be written in a hinting way. That's the pasuk at the end of Parshas Pinchas, that it says that you bring these karbonos on the Yomim Tovim, apart from the vows you've made, etc., etc. So it says, apart from that, Omar Oid, Milvad, Eila, Adorim, and Iskorim, apart from these vows that are mentioned, Yesh Oid, Nidre, Hedju. There are other regular vows made by ordinary people. Like anything that comes out of the mouth of a person, Chayav l'kayim v'lasos, he is obligated to fulfill and to do kol asher osar al nafshoy, everything that he is forbade on his soul. And with all these things, he can't profane his word, but other people can annul for him. So in other words, the reason for the parasha being placed here is not random, obviously, and the Ramban, as we've seen many, many times, is very set on the chronology of the Pesukim. And he says, well, because it mentions at the end of Pinchas the fact what the karbonos you have to bring on the Yom Tovim, and it says that apart from the vows there is a vow to bring a sacrifice. Therefore, it mentions the other vows that people can make. But the direction of travel of the Ramban, which is different to Rashi, is that the emphasis on the heads of the tribes is very much because this is a specialized area, and it's an area which really we only teach in detail, it seems, to the Chachomim. Why? Number one, because they have a greater responsibility and an ability to annul and to matter and adorim, but also because we don't want people to treat vows lightly. We're very serious about vows, about the way people give their words, right? It's a very serious thing. Yeah, that's the way Kol Nidre is such a significant thing. There you are, right? Okay, so there's a huge amount in Parshas Matos Masai. So we're going to see now a little bit about what was going on with the battle against Midian. The Ramban makes a fascinating point. Perek Lamed Aleph Pasuk Vav. There you go a bit further forward. Lamed Aleph Pasuk Vav.
in Israel.
Yeah. So in the battle for Midian, so what you notice is, what you notice is that it says that they sent Elef Lamata, yeah, Elef Lamata. That's 1,000 from the tribes, whatever. So there was a very specific arrangement. It wasn't everyone, and Pinchas ran the show. Pinchas led them. And the Ramban says, he didn't send the whole army. They Midyanim were a very large people, and they were heavily fortified cities. So logically, you should throw all your guns at the Midianites, right? Why did they not send everyone? And the answer is, there were many people who stumbled in this sin with the daughters of Moab. There were many people who fell into it. They weren't suitable to avenge, to wage this war. Therefore, they chose Anoshim Tzadikim v'Yiduim l'Shivteim. It chose righteous people who were known to the Shvatim. It's a very interesting concept. You might think, why not? Let them do tshuva. They stumbled and they fell for these girls, these women, these Benos, daughters of Moab, let them go and now kill them all. The answer is no, because in order to carry out this act of nakoma, of vengeance, it has to be l'shem shamayim. So we're looking for tzaddikim, looking for the righteous people, not people who are ordinary. Now he says that Moshe didn't tell them what to do, command them what to do. All he said to them was to extract the vengeance of Hashem against Midian. The Ramban says Moshe Rabbeinu assumed that they would completely eradicate them, like the vengeance of Amalek and everything else. He was angry when he saw that they left over the women and the children and the behemoth. They should have killed them first because they were the ones who caused the sin, right? Okay, and then he says, since he saw they wanted to spoil, he forgave the youngest of the women, and the spoil, right? So the Ramban's first explanation is that the anger was directed to the fact that he assumed they would wipe them out, but he didn't. And then he says to them, the very people who caused the problem, they were the ones who should have the nakama was meant to be directed against. So, okay. And then he goes on to say that the second explanation, which we don't necessarily have to see inside, is that Moshe commanded them to basically cause them problems and to extract the vengeance. And they went and they did, they caused problems like those who just spoil a city. That's what he told them to do. And he didn't say just to extract vengeance. But Hashem put them all they all fell into their hands. And therefore he says, basically, they should have carried out the vengeance in the right way, especially for those who caused the sin in the first place. Yeah. What was that?
I was going to ask just on the numbers thing. So effectively, Moshe's expectations were obviously of Hashem's helping, in balancing those numbers off to be victorious.
Seems to be, yeah. Even though numerically it didn't really.
I never quite know whether it's right.
Yeah,
to assume.
Yeah, numerically, even though numerically it didn't work out in that way. Yeah, it didn't work out in that way. Yeah.
Is it when it captured Jericho? Drink and just to demonstrate Hashem behind it.
Is that right? Did they keep? I can't remember. Right.
They wanted to.
Oh, I think that was Gidon. Was that with Gidon when they were made to drink and they reduced the numbers because they were afraid? Is that they kept reducing the numbers of the army? I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. That's right. Yeah. So they reduced all the numbers again and again. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was Gideon. I think so. Gidon, when there was a battle, and you're right, and they made them drink, and then he showed where they bowed down and how they I think so. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's see that he goes on to talk about how the actual anger wasn't directed to Pinchas, and Pinchas, the Medrash says, he says, you did what you told us to do. We did what you told us to do, right? And he says that basically you have to understand this, that Hashem, this is according to Ramban's second explanation, there was a general instruction to wreak vengeance. And Pinchas says we've done that, right? And on that, Moshe Rabbeinu there seems to have been directed to those officers and saying, you should have carried out the ones, particularly the revenge against those who caused the thing in the sin in the first place. Right, let me just see. Right, the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. There are two Perek Lamed base pasuk base. So the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven are the ones who seek out to stay on the side of the Yarden. Right, they don't want to go into Eretz Yisrael. They're happy where they are. Moshe Rabbeinu points out. Ramban points out the fact that there is a discrepancy in the order of how God and Reuven are mentioned. And this is what the Ramban does, he notices these details. If you look carefully, it says, Umiknei Rav, the Pasuk says, there was a great number of amount of cattle, flocks, Bnei Reuven, Vilivnei God, Otzumod. So Reuven and God had lots of cattle, right? And they saw this lad, etc., and they thought we like it here. By Yavoy Bnei God or Bnei Reuven. But the Bnei God and the Bnei Reuven came and they said to Moshe, we want to stay. So why does it change the order? Ramban says, Hiktam Akosa Bnei Reuven, Pasuk Orisha, and Miknei Rav, Bnei Reuven, Bnei God. Okay, it says Reuven in the first Pasuk, Kamishpat, and that makes sense. Ki hu Bachar, or Ben Hagvira. Reuven was the older. He was the son of the foremost wife. He was Leah's son. When it says, when Moshe Rabbeinu is describing what actually transpired in Sefer Devarim, when he recounts the episode and he says, I gave to these Shvatim, these tribes, what does it say? He says, I gave to Reuven and God, because Reuven deserves to come first. Reuven is the firstborn, right? However, Aval b'chola parsha azu yakdim b'nei God. In this entire parsha, you know who comes first? God, right? It says the b'nei God and b'nei Reuven came and they said to Moshe. Yeah. No, the first pasuk is saying, describing what happened, that they had a lot of flocks, and it says Reuven and God. But then it said, when they came to Moshe Rabbeinu, it says Bnei God and Bnei Reuven. That's not by chance, right? He says the reason is because because God were the ones who actually gave this advice, suggested this idea. They were the ones who spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu first. With this inheritance. They were more powerful than the Bnei Reuven. As the pasuk about Torah Zoraya Avkod Code. That pasuk is said in the bracha that is given in V'zos HaBracha to God. It says they would tear the arm with the head. Now this is a very skillful thing to do in battle, to be able to, in one blow of the sword, remove the head and the arm. I'll do that in fencing in the Olympics. Yeah. No, that's a serious, like they had this great strength, right? They were afraid, therefore, right, to leave to dwell alone in this land. That's why they weren't afraid, right? They weren't afraid. When Moshe was concerned that, you know why, maybe these people, they're just afraid. They're afraid to go into Canaan because of the great stories about the spies brought back, right? Moshe Rabbeinu's response to him is, you don't trust Hashem because you're worried about how scary the inhabitants are. And that he would punish them to lead them in the Midbar. And that's why the Bnei God led Reuven, and they said, God forbid, they said, we're not afraid of them. On the contrary, we will go armed first. On the contrary, we'll consume them. We will be the ones to fight first. Very interesting the way the Ramban notices that this is the difference. Although precedence is given to Reuven in terms of respect, when Moshe Rabbeinu later on says, this is what I did, he says, right? I gave it to Reuven and God, because Reuven give precedence to, but in fact, it was God who were the strong and powerful ones, and therefore they approached first. The puzzle here which we might just sort of briefly outside, is how Menashe fit in. Because you see, Menashe is not mentioned here. Yet we know that Chatzi Shevet HaMenashe, says that at the end of the Parsha, right? It says that it was given also to half for Shevet Menashe. Where did they come from? It's it's a bit confusing to understand why they received anything, right? And the Ramban says in Posuk Lamed Gimel that they didn't come first, but when the land was divided up to the two Shvatim, he saw that it was bigger than they needed, and he asked, whoever wants to get an inheritance with them. And there were some people of Shevet Menashe who wanted it. Maybe he says they had a lot of flocks, and therefore they got a part of it. There are different explanations given. Some say, I think, the Menashe, the half of the tribe of Menashe, was put together with them because they could teach Torah, so they could set an example for the others, right? They're doing. But the Ramban also says, if you look carefully in Sefer Yehoshua, he says, it's not half of Menashe. It's actually maybe a quarter or even less. There were two families. What? Yeah, exactly. He says, Chatzi doesn't mean half, it means a part.
Peace.
A piece. Yeah, it's a piece. And he brings the psukim that deal with this and explain to it that actually okay, he goes through different ways of understanding how, what the pit sections were. I think his conclusion is that there were two families here. These two families from Menashe were Mochir and Gilad, and he said that they actually, he suggests, had fewer numbers than the others. Okay, and therefore they wanted to separate from the rest of Menashe, so they would conquer land and get more land than they otherwise would have been apportioned in the land of Israel, land of Canaan. Does that make sense? Because they were smaller numerically, the land they would have received would have been less. So by this way, they actually achieved more land on the other side of the Yarden. That's, I think, the Ramban's approach.
Rambam just earlier that makes the point that there was too much land for Reuben and Gad.
Yes, he does say that.
Yeah,
but he's saying
he actually drove that. In other words, he looked for people. Isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. The Ramban suggests that he actually looked for people to take it over. Yeah. Let's just see a tiny bit about on Parshas Masai, a little bit. So the big question is, why are all the way stations, the places they stopped at, why are they listed, right? Why are they listed? And the Ramban says, Acharei Nikmas Midjan, the beginning of the parasha, right? After the vengeance against Midjan, Shomalach Kodesh Baruch Hu Moshe Achati Yosef Alamecha, after you be gathered into your people, but Acharei Shachalak Eretz Sichon V'Oig, Ubonu Ha'arim and his chorus, they built the cities that were mentioned. Nosen Daitu Lechtov Masais. He thought to write the journeying. He wanted to, with this, tell the kindness of Hashem with them. Even though he decreed on them to move them around in the desert. This is all Rashi, right? That they don't think they were always wandering around. There was only 42 stops. Okay, so the first pshat he brings is Rashi. Rashi says, you know why I list the Masais? To show how kind Hashem was, because even though there was a wandering in the desert, most of the time they weren't wandering. If you deduct all of those stops that were before the 40 years at the beginning and the ones at the end, you find that they weren't wandering that much. But then he says that the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, in the Guide for Perplexed, adds another reason. V'hosef harav b'Moreh Nevuchim and Nevuchim to'eles b'yadiyosam, a reason for the listing of them. Lomar hatzorech lahazkeh hamasoim gadol ma'od. The Rambam says in Moreh Nevuchim, there's a great need to mention these journeyings. Ki hanisim v'ha'osos hanasos, the miracles and the wonders, the beautiful pieces which were performed. Hoyamitios l'chol orayim. Anyone who would have seen these miracles would have been true, crystal clear in front of their eyes. However, they also in the future, Yiyu Dvarim Bishmua. There'll be things they would just hear about. Right? And there might be people who listen and hear them and deny it. Because time means people forget. From these great wonders, you have the fact that they were in the desert for 40 years. They found them on every day. They lived in places which are very far from destinations, and people weren't natural people to live there. Not a place where you have nice fruits. You didn't eat bread, you drink wine or intoxicating beverages. These signs all happened as a miracle, visible to the eye. When Hashem knew that things would pass over these signs, that which would happen, because time would pass. People who heard about them wouldn't believe them. People would start making excuses. They would say, yeah, they were in the desert, but the desert was near a town. It's like going to Dubai and going on a day trip, excursion to play in the sand dunes. They were in the desert, yeah. People will say they're in the desert, but a nice desert, comfortable desert. Place where people are, inhabit. Not all deserts are so desolate. He says, B'nai, I didn't make it up, he says it, he talks about this. The deserts, B'nai Arav Hayom. The deserts where the Arabs live today. Right? So Ramban is telling you, that's what I'm talking about, right? People will say that's the type of desert they were in. Or a place where there was a place for plowing and harvesting. Wasn't so bad. Maybe there were things growing. They had water. Okay, therefore, he distant, distance, from the hearts of people, these thoughts. And he strengthened all these wonders and wonders with Zikaron HaMasais. Yeah, as a member of the journeys, in other words, it was strengthened, I think, by the Chazak Eila, the Chazak HaMasais, basically by mentioning the journeys, it strengthens what happened in these places. So the people would see in future generations and know the great wonders, how people stood there in their places for 40 years. These are his words. By mentioning the places and the locations, and this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened, people will understand and know that these were very desolate places, and these were places far out, and it was all the miracles transpired there. And we can maybe add to what the Rambam is saying, is that by having the locations, it makes it real, it makes it, it won't be sort of ephemeral and whatever. People will actually say, well, it's a fixed place. It helps solidify the memory. Finally, he says, the writing of the Masais, he says, this is Ramban himself, is a mitzvah of Hashem, either for the reasons that have been mentioned by Rashi or the Rambam, or also another reason, it might be a reason that we don't know. It might be a secret reason we don't know about. If you look carefully at this pasuk, there are two ways of reading this pasuk base. It says, Vayichtov Moshe, Moshe wrote, Es Moitzoyhem, their goings out, L'maseyhem, according to their journeys, Al Pi Hashem. Now that word Al Pi Hashem could either be connected, he says, look at the Rebbe of Rome, the Ibn Ezra Shomer says, Shudovak in Maseyhem. Ibn Ezra says that Moshe wrote their goings out according to their journeys, which were Al Pi Hashem. That means the journeying was by Hashem's command. That's how the Ibn Ezra understands it. The Ramban says that doesn't make sense. He doesn't understand that. Shekvar hodienu zeh pi Hashem yachnu pi Hashem yisol. We know that in Parshas Ba'aloscha. They would journey by word of Hashem. They would encamp by word of Hashem and journey by word of Hashem. We know they traveled by Hashem. The Ramban therefore says that the words al pi Hashem, by mouth of Hashem, they connect to the first words in the pasuk. Vayichtov Moshe. Moshe wrote al pi Hashem, that the writing was al pi Hashem. There was a specific injunction, as if Hashem is saying, you may not understand why I'm telling you to write these journey points down, but that's what I'm telling you. So Ramban is just telling us here that Rashi has his reason, it shows the kindness of Hashem. The Rambam has his reason so that it makes people understand and believe the miracles and how real, how miraculous the whole thing was, right? The Ramban says also it may be that we don't understand. And it was all done al pi Hashem. Hashem had a reason for writing in the Torah, and therefore that's why he did so. So Ramban says. Okay, we will leave it there.
Yeah.
Have a good Shabbos.